My student was a billionaire's daughter. She pretended to be poor. Hello, dear friends. I'm Miss Walker. I've been teaching high school English for 25 years, and today I need to share with you the most mind-blowing and thought-provoking story of my entire career. This is a story about assumptions, about genuine human connections, and about a teenage girl who taught me that sometimes the most profound lessons come from the most unexpected deceptions. What I'm about to tell you will challenge everything you think you know about wealth, poverty, and the lengths of go to find authentic relationships. It's a story that changed not only how I see my students, but how I understand the complex motivations that drive human behavior. It was September 2022 when I first met Emma Rodriguez, a quiet 16-year-old who had transferred to Lincoln High School in San Diego, California. From the moment Emma walked into my AP English literature class, I could tell she was different from many of our other students. Not because she stood out, but because she seemed to deliberately blend into the background. Emma was a petite girl with long, dark brown hair that she usually wore in a simple ponytail, and she had these thoughtful hazel eyes that seemed to observe everything while revealing very little. What struck me immediately about Emma was how she dressed, always in the same few outfits that appeared to be well-worn and carefully maintained. She typically wore faded jeans, simple t-shirts, and an old denim jacket that looked like it had seen better days. During our first week of classes, I began to notice patterns in Emma's behavior that suggested she might be from a financially struggling family. She never bought lunch from the cafeteria, instead bringing simple sandwiches in brown paper bags. When other students talked about weekend plans involving movies, shopping, or restaurants, Emma would listen quietly but never participate in the conversations. When I announced our first field trip to see a production of Hamlet at the local theater, Emma approached me after class with a look of disappointment. "Miss Walker," she said quietly, "I really want to go to the play, but I can't afford the ticket. Is there any way I could maybe do extra credit instead?" My heart went out to this earnest young girl who clearly valued education, but seemed to be limited by her family's financial circumstances. "Don't worry about it, Emma," I told her. "We have scholarship funds for students who need assistance. You'll definitely be able to go." Emma's face lit up with genuine gratitude. "Well, thank you so much, Miss Walker. I promise I'll write the best report you've ever read about the performance." And she did. Emma's analysis of the Hamlet production was sophisticated, insightful, and demonstrated a deep understanding of Shakespeare that impressed me greatly. But what touched me even more was the handwritten thank you note she gave me after the trip, expressing how much the experience had meant to her and how grateful she was for the opportunity. As the semester progressed, I continued to notice signs that Emma was dealing with financial hardship. She never had money for school supplies, often asking to borrow pens or paper. Her textbooks were always the worn school-provided copies, rather than new personal editions. When we had classroom celebrations or potluck events, Emma would apologize for not being able to contribute, explaining that her family was going through a tough time. Despite her apparent financial struggles, Emma was one of the most dedicated and talented students I had ever taught. Her essays were consistently excellent, demonstrating not only strong writing skills but also a mature understanding of complex literary themes. She participated thoughtfully in class discussions and showed a genuine passion for learning that reminded me why I had become a teacher in the first place. What impressed me most about Emma was her attitude toward her circumstances. She never complained about not having things that other students took for granted. She never expressed jealousy or resentment toward classmates who seemed to have more advantages. Instead, she approached every educational opportunity with enthusiasm and gratitude, as if each lesson was a gift she didn't want to waste. During parent-teacher conferences in October, I was surprised when Emma's mother didn't show up for our scheduled meeting. When I asked Emma about it the next day, she seemed embarrassed. "My mom really wanted to come, Miss Walker, but she had to work a double shift. She's been working extra hours lately to help pay the bills. She asked me to tell you how much she appreciates everything you're doing to help me succeed." I assured Emma that I understood and suggested we could arrange a phone call with her mother at a more convenient time. But somehow that call never materialized. Emma would always have a reason why her mother wasn't available. Working late, taking care of a sick relative, dealing with some other family crisis. As the school year continued, I found myself becoming increasingly protective of Emma. When I overheard other students making casual comments about expensive purchases or family vacations, I would glance at Emma to see if she seemed hurt or left out. When the class discussed college plans, I made sure to emphasize scholarship opportunities and financial aid options, knowing that Emma would need all the help she could get to pursue higher education. I also began going out of my way to support Emma in small ways that I hoped wouldn't embarrass her. I would accidentally buy too many school supplies and offer the extras to any student who needed them, making sure Emma knew she could take what she needed. During lunch periods, I would sometimes bring extra food and share it with students who were staying in my classroom, including Emma. Emma always accepted these gestures with gracious thanks, but I noticed she was careful never to take advantage or ask for more than what was offered. She maintained her dignity even while accepting help, which only made me admire her more. In November, we had a school fundraiser where students were encouraged to bring donations for families in need during the holiday season. Emma approached me privately after I announced the drive. "Miss Walker, I wish I could contribute to the fundraiser, but my family, we're actually the kind of family that would benefit from donations like this. Is that awful? I feel so selfish." "Emma," I said gently, "there's nothing selfish about needing help. That's exactly why we have these programs. And you contribute in so many other ways, your insights in class discussions, your willingness to help other students with their writing, your positive attitude. Those things are just as valuable as monetary donations." Emma seemed relieved by my response, but I could see she still felt uncomfortable about her family's financial situation. I made a mental note to discreetly ensure that Emma and her family would be included among the recipients of the Holiday Assistance Program. December brought our annual winter formal, and I watched as students excitedly discussed their dress shopping and dinner plans. Emma listened to these conversations with her usual quiet attention, but I could sense her disappointment at being left out of yet another milestone experience. After class one day, I approached Emma about the dance. "Noma, are you planning to attend the winter formal?" She shook her head sadly. "I'd love to go, Miss Walker, but formal dresses are expensive, and my family just can't afford it right now. Maybe next year." That evening, I went to several local dress shops and worked with the owners to arrange for donated formal wear that could be made available to students who needed it. I presented this as a school-wide initiative, but I was thinking primarily of Emma when I organized it. When I announced the formal wear assistance program to my classes, Emma stayed after to talk to me privately. "Miss Walker, did you do this because of me? Because if you did, I don't know how to thank you. You've been so kind to me all year, and I don't deserve it." "Emma, you deserve every opportunity to participate in school activities. You're one of my most dedicated students, and I want to make sure you can enjoy all aspects of your high school experience." Emma attended the winter formal in a beautiful navy blue dress that complemented her dark hair perfectly. Seeing her confidence and joy that night was one of the most rewarding moments of my teaching career. She looked radiant, and several classmates commented on how lovely she looked and how glad they were that she could join them. As we moved into the spring semester, Emma continued to excel academically while maintaining her humble, grateful attitude toward any assistance she received. She had been accepted to several universities and was waiting to hear about financial aid packages that would determine where she could afford to attend. It was during this time that I had an experience that would begin to unravel everything I thought I knew about Emma Rodriguez. On a Thursday afternoon in March, I had stayed late at school to grade papers and prepare for the next day's lessons. As I was leaving the building around 6 p.m., I noticed Emma walking across the parking lot toward the street. This was unusual, since I knew she typically rode the bus home, and the buses had stopped running hours earlier. Curious about how she was getting home so late, I watched as Emma walked to a black sedan that was parked on the street just outside school property. As she approached the car, a man in a suit got out of the driver's seat and opened the rear door for her. The car was clearly expensive, sleek, new, and the kind of vehicle that cost more than most teachers' annual salaries. I was puzzled by this scene. Who was this man? Was Emma working for a wealthy family as a babysitter or house cleaner? That would explain her financial struggles. She was probably working to help support her family, but something about the interaction seemed different than an employer-employee relationship. The man's demeanor toward Emma was respectful, almost deferential. As I drove home, I convinced myself that there was a reasonable explanation. Perhaps Emma's mother worked for this wealthy family, and they occasionally gave Emma rides, or maybe Emma was tutoring their children, and they provided transportation as part of the arrangement. But the image of Emma getting into that expensive car stayed with me, creating a small seed of curiosity that would only grow larger in the coming weeks. A few days later, I had another puzzling encounter. I was at the mall on Saturday afternoon, doing some shopping for classroom supplies, when I saw Emma in the distance. She was coming out of one of the most expensive stores in the mall, carrying several shopping bags. But here's what was strange. She wasn't dressed in her usual worn clothes. Instead, she was wearing a designer outfit that looked like it cost more than most people spend on clothes in a year. I called out to her, but there were crowds of people between us, and Emma didn't seem to hear me. By the time I made my way through the crowd to where I had seen her, she was gone. I stood there feeling confused and slightly unsettled. Had that really been Emma? If so, how could a girl who couldn't afford a theater ticket be shopping at luxury stores? I tried to rationalize what I had seen. Maybe Emma had been shopping with someone else's money, running errands for an employer. Maybe the clothes belonged to someone else and she was returning them. Maybe I had been mistaken and it wasn't Emma at all. But deep down, I knew what I had seen, and it didn't align with everything I thought I knew about my student's life. The next week in class, Emma was back to her usual appearance. Simple clothes, humble demeanor, graciously accepting help with school supplies. I studied her more carefully than I had before, looking for signs that might explain the contradictions I had observed. What I noticed was that Emma's old clothes, while simple, were actually quite well made. Her jeans, though faded, had designer labels. Her simple t-shirts were high-quality cotton. Her worn denim jacket, upon closer inspection, bore the subtle logo of an expensive brand. These weren't the clothes of someone who shopped at thrift stores. They were expensive clothes that had been deliberately distressed or chosen for their understated appearance. I also began to notice that Emma never seemed to lack for basic necessities. Despite her claims of financial hardship, she always had her textbooks. Her assignments were always completed on high-quality paper, and she never seemed genuinely hungry or deprived. Her struggles seemed to involve only visible things. The field trip tickets, the formal dress, the lunch money, while less obvious needs were always somehow met. The more I observed, the more questions I had. But I didn't know how to address my suspicions without seeming like I was questioning Emma's honesty, or worse, trying to catch her in a lie. The situation came to a head in April. During our preparation for the advanced placement exam, Emma had been accepted to Stanford University, but was supposedly waiting to hear about financial aid before she could confirm her enrollment. "Miss Walker," she said after class, one day, "I'm so worried about college. Even with financial aid, I don't know if I'll be able to afford Stanford. I might have to go to community college instead, which would break my heart." That evening, something compelled me to do some research. I started by looking up Emma's last name, Rodriguez, in connection with Stanford University in San Diego. What I found shocked me to my core. The search results led me to articles about Eduardo Rodriguez, a billionaire tech entrepreneur who had founded one of the most successful software companies in Silicon Valley. According to the articles, Eduardo Rodriguez was not only incredibly wealthy, but was also a major donor to Stanford University. Their articles mentioned that he had a teenage daughter who was a student in San Diego. With trembling hands, I searched for more information about Eduardo Rodriguez's family. I found photos from charity galas and business events, and there she was, Emma Rodriguez, identified in photo captions as the daughter of billionaire tech mogul Eduardo Rodriguez. In these photos, Emma looked completely different from the modest student I knew. Her hair was professionally styled, she wore expensive designer gowns, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to luxury and privilege. But it was definitely her, the same hazel eyes, the same facial features, the same intelligent expression. I sat in my living room, staring at my computer screen in disbelief. My struggling student, the girl I had been helping with scholarship funds and donated formal wear, was the daughter of a billionaire. She could afford anything she wanted, attend any university, buy any car or house or piece of clothing. Yet she had spent the entire school year pretending to be poor, accepting my help and expressing gratitude for assistance she didn't need. I felt a mixture of emotions, confusion, betrayal, anger, and strangely, curiosity. Why would someone with unlimited resources pretend to struggle financially? What could Emma possibly gain from such an elaborate deception? The next day at school, I found it difficult to act normally around Emma. Every time she mentioned money worries or expressed gratitude for help, I had to bite my tongue to keep from confronting her. I needed to understand what was happening before I said anything that might damage our relationship or embarrass her. That afternoon, I made a decision that I knew was ethically questionable, but felt necessary for my own peace of mind. I watched from my car as Emma walked to the same black sedan I had seen before. This time I was close enough to see the license plate and the driver. The man who opened the door for her was clearly a professional driver. Uniformed, deferential, the kind of chauffeur that only very wealthy families employ. I followed the car at a distance as it left the school area and drove toward one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in San Diego. The car turned into the driveway of a massive estate that I estimated must be worth tens of millions of dollars. The house was enormous, with manicured gardens, a circular driveway, and security gates that spoke of serious wealth. As Emma got out of the car and walked toward the front door of this mansion, I felt like I was watching a movie rather than reality. This was where my struggling student lived, in a house that could probably accommodate 20 families. I drove home in a daze, trying to process what I had discovered. Emma Rodriguez wasn't poor. She wasn't struggling financially. She was one of the wealthiest teenagers in California, living a double life that had completely fooled me and apparently everyone else at school. That night, I barely slept as I wrestled with how to handle this situation. Should I confront Emma directly? Should I report her deception to the school administration? Should I quietly withdraw the assistance I had been providing and pretend I never discovered the truth? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I needed to understand Emma's motivations before I decided how to respond. There had to be a reason why someone with everything would choose to pretend to have nothing. The next day, I asked Emma to stay after class for what I said was a routine check-in about her college plans. When we were alone, I took a deep breath and decided to be direct. Emma, I said gently, I need to ask you something, and I want you to know that I'm not angry or judgmental. I'm just trying to understand. Are you really struggling financially, or is there something else going on? Emma's face went pale, and I could see panic in her eyes. What do you mean, Miss Walker? Of course we're struggling. Why would you ask that? Emma, I know who your father is. I know about your family's wealth. I've seen where you live. I need you to help me understand why you've been pretending to be someone you're not. For a moment, Emma looked like she might deny everything. But then her shoulders sagged, and I saw tears forming in her eyes. How did you find out? She whispered. That's not important right now. What's important is that you help me understand why you felt like you needed to lie about your circumstances. Emma was quiet for a long time, and I could see her struggling with whether to continue the deception or finally tell the truth. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. Miss Walker, have you ever wondered if people like you for who you are or for what you can do for them? What do you mean? I mean, when people know I'm Eduardo Rodriguez's daughter, everything changes. Suddenly, I'm not just Emma anymore. I'm a contact, a networking opportunity, a potential source of money or favors or access to my father's world. She paused, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. When I was at my private school before, I never knew if my friends genuinely liked me or if they were just using me to get closer to my family's wealth and connections. Every birthday party invitation, every study group, every friendly conversation, I always wondered if there were ulterior motives. I began to understand what Emma was telling me, but I needed to hear more. So you decided to transfer to a public school and pretend to be poor. I wanted to see what it felt like to be treated like a normal person. I wanted to know if I could make real friends, if teachers would care about me for my academic potential rather than my family's donation capacity. I wanted to experience genuine human connections without the complication of money. Emma looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. Miss Walker, This year in your class has been the best school experience of my life. You've been kind to me, encouraged my writing, helped me grow as a student, and it was all because you saw something in me as a person, not because of my family's wealth. For the first time in my life, I felt like someone cared about Emma the student, not Emma the billionaire's daughter. I felt my own eyes filling with tears as I began to understand the profound loneliness and mistrust that had led Emma to create this elaborate deception. Emma, I care about you because you're intelligent, thoughtful, hardworking, and kind. Your family's money has nothing to do with how I see you as a student or as a person. But would you have treated me the same way if you had known from the beginning that my father could donate millions to the school? Oh! Would you have pushed me to work harder, or would you have been more lenient because of who my family is? Would you have seen my potential, or would you have seen my connections? These were uncomfortable questions that forced me to examine my own potential biases. Would I have treated Emma differently if I had known about her wealth? I wanted to believe the answer was no. But Emma's questions made me realize that wealth creates complicated dynamics in relationships, often without people even realizing it. Emma, I understand why you felt like you needed to test people's motivations, but don't you think it's unfair to build relationships based on deception? I've been genuinely worried about you, going out of my way to help you, spending my own money to support what I thought were your needs. I know, Emma said, sobbing now. I know it was wrong and I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. At first, I just wanted to see if people would treat me normally, if they thought I was like everyone else. But then you were so kind and caring, and I didn't want to ruin that by revealing who I really was. What about the scholarship money for the theater trip, the formal dress program? I organized those things specifically to help you. I know, and I felt terrible about it. I donated the same amount of money anonymously to the school scholarship fund. I know that doesn't make it right, but I tried to make sure no one else lost opportunities because of my deception. I sat back in my chair, trying to process everything Emma had told me. I was angry about the deception, but I was also beginning to understand the complex emotions and motivations that had driven her to create this false identity. Emma, what happens now? Are you going to continue pretending to be someone you're not? I don't know, she admitted. I've been accepted to Stanford, and I could go there without any financial concerns. But if I show up as Eduardo Rodriguez's daughter, everyone will know immediately. The networking will start, the special treatment, the assumptions about why I'm there. Wonder if any fraud, wonder you. I've been accepted to Stanford, and I could go there without any financial concerns. And if you continue pretending to be financially struggling, then I'm living a lie, and eventually someone else will figure it out, just like you did. Plus, it means I can't fully enjoy or appreciate the opportunities that my family's wealth could provide. We sat in silence for a few minutes, both of us grappling with the complexity of the situation. Emma, can I ask you something? In all the time you've been pretending to struggle financially, have you learned anything about yourself or about other people? Emma considered this question carefully. I've learned that I'm stronger and more resourceful than I thought. When you believe you have limited options, you get creative about finding solutions. I've also learned that some of the most meaningful help comes from people who have very little to give, but choose to share it anyway. She paused, thinking. I've learned that being treated normally, without special deference or extra attention, actually feels really good. I've learned that my ideas and opinions have value independent of my family's influence. And I've learned that there are people like you who genuinely care about helping students succeed, regardless of their background. What about the negative aspects? What has this experience cost you? It's been lonely, Emma admitted. I couldn't invite friends over to my house. I couldn't share exciting family experiences. I couldn't be fully honest with people I was starting to care about. And I felt guilty every time someone helped me, knowing that I didn't really need the assistance. As our conversation continued, I found myself moving from anger to empathy. Emma's deception had been elaborate and sustained, but it had also been driven by a genuine desire to understand herself and experience authentic relationships. Emma, I need you to know that discovering the truth about your background doesn't change how I see you as a student. Your essays are still brilliant, your insights are still valuable, and your character, us apart from this deception, is still admirable. Really? Emma looked at me with hope and uncertainty. Really, but I also need you to understand that building relationships on false pretenses creates problems. The people who care about you deserve to know who you really are. Miss Walker, if you had known from the beginning that I was Eduardo Rodriguez's daughter, would you have treated me differently? It was the question I had been dreading, but I knew I needed to answer honestly. I don't know, I admitted. I'd like to think I would have treated you exactly the same, but wealth creates complicated dynamics. I might have been more intimidated or more deferential, or more conscious of how my actions might be perceived by your family. I might have had different expectations, or made different assumptions about your needs and goals. That's exactly why I felt like I needed to hide my identity, Emma said. People can't help but treat wealth differently, even when they try not to. But Emma, that means you were never giving people the chance to prove they could see past your family's money. You were making the decision for them by not giving them the opportunity to show that they could value you for who you are regardless of your wealth. This observation seemed to impact Emma deeply. I never thought of it that way. I was so focused on protecting myself from people who might have ulterior motives that I didn't consider whether I was being unfair to people who might have genuine motivations. Our conversation continued for over an hour as we explored the ethical, emotional, and practical implications of Emma's year-long deception. By the end, we had reached some important understandings. Emma agreed that she needed to be honest with the people who had become important to her, including friends and teachers who had invested emotionally in her supposed struggles. She also agreed to make financial restitution for any resources that had been allocated to her under false pretenses. For my part, I agreed to help Emma navigate the transition back to her authentic identity and to support her as she dealt with the consequences of her deception. I also committed to examining my own potential biases about wealth and to treating Emma based on her character and abilities rather than her family's financial status. Over the remaining weeks of the school year, Emma gradually revealed her true identity to close friends and trusted teachers. The reactions varied. Some people felt hurt by the deception. Others were understanding about her motivations, and a few were simply fascinated by the complexity of her situation. What impressed me most was how Emma handled these conversations. She took full responsibility for her deception, explained her motivations without making excuses, and worked to rebuild trust with the people who mattered to her. Emma did attend Stanford University, where she studied literature and psychology. She chose to live in regular dormitories rather than luxury accommodations, and she was selective about revealing her family background, sharing that information only with people who had proven they valued her for her personal qualities. During her college years, Emma wrote several thoughtful essays about identity, privilege, and authentic relationships. Her insights about the psychology of wealth and social dynamics earned recognition from professors and peers, and her work was published in academic journals. After graduating from Stanford, Emma chose to become a teacher herself, specializing in working with students from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds. She uses her understanding of both wealth and the perception of poverty to help bridge divides between students from different economic circumstances. Emma and I have maintained a close relationship over the years. She often tells me that our conversation that day in my classroom was a turning point in her understanding of herself and her relationships with others. "Miss Walker," she said during a recent visit, "you taught me that authenticity is more valuable than protection." Yes, revealing who I really was created some complications and even some disappointments, but it also allowed me to form genuinely meaningful relationships based on truth rather than deception. Emma also established a scholarship fund at our high school, providing assistance to students who genuinely struggle with financial barriers to education. She insists that recipients be selected based solely on need and merit, and she remains anonymous to avoid any perception that students are receiving help because of connections to her family. Looking back on Emma's year-long deception, I'm struck by the complexity of the situation and the valuable lessons it taught both of us. Emma's story forced me to examine my own assumptions about wealth, poverty, and the way these factors influence how we see and treat other people. I learned that assumptions about students' backgrounds can be completely wrong, and that the most important thing is to focus on each student's individual character, potential, and needs rather than their perceived circumstances. Emma's story also taught me about the unexpected challenges that come with extreme wealth, particularly for young people trying to form authentic relationships and understand their own identity apart from their family's financial status. Most importantly, Emma's experience reminded me that every student who walks into my classroom is dealing with complexities that I may never fully understand. Whether those complexities involve financial struggle, family pressure, social anxiety, or any other challenge, my role as a teacher is to create an environment where students feel safe, valued, and supported for who they are as individuals. Emma Rodriguez taught me that sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the most unexpected situations. Her deception was wrong, but her motivations were understandable, and the conversations that resulted from discovering the truth deepened both of our understandings of authenticity, trust, and genuine human connection. Today, when I meet new students, I try to see each one clearly, not through the lens of assumptions about their background, but with an appreciation for the complex individual sitting in front of me. Because you never know whether the struggling student is actually struggling, or whether the wealthy student is actually the one who needs the most support in discovering who they really are. Emma's story reminds me that wealth and poverty are both complex experiences that shape people in unexpected ways, and that the most important thing we can offer our students is genuine care and respect for their individual humanity, regardless of their circumstances. Sometimes the students who teach us the most are the ones who challenge our assumptions and force us to see the world from entirely new perspectives. Emma Rodriguez was definitely one of those students, and I'm grateful for the lessons she taught me about the complexity of human motivations and the value of authentic relationships.